This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Very special show. We have Alan Keyes on for segments 2 and 3, the great thinker, the great American, someone who is at the level of our founding fathers, really, in terms of his intellect. You know, our founding fathers were lawyers, they were philosophers, they were architects like Jefferson, they were farmers. They did everything, and they were very learned. We don't have that in government today. We got basically a bunch of court jesters and clowns, and I was watching some of those clowns this morning with regard to a hearing where Dr. Anthony Fauci appeared. He appears with his little mask. He's very proud that he threw out the first pitch at the Washington Nationals game at the opening of the season this year. He has become a celebrity. He has become the Mohammed, the Prophet Muhammad. I dare not call him the Messiah, okay, but he's more like Muhammad for the left, because he is their means, he is their tool to destroy the economy, to harm the health of the American people, and to defeat the president of the United States, President Trump. And he is, in fact, President Trump, hanging by a thread right now, in large part because of Fauci and his so-called advice. It changes every day. Fauci now has a concept that we should have space helmets, like we're blasting off with SpaceX of Elon Musk's company, and we should wear that around, okay? He doesn't have any clue as to what's going on in terms of how the country can survive this. And what's more troubling is that my client, Dr. Judy Mikovits, has written several books with Kent Heckenlively over the plague of corruption and everything else, who talks about how Fauci, when she worked with him at our military laboratory in Fort Detrick, Maryland, the same laboratory that developed the anthrax that attacked us after 9/11, that's a laboratory that studies viruses. It tries to prevent pandemics. It tries to prevent attacks on us with bioweapons, but in fact actually creates bioweapons. The United States does it, and so does every single country. It's against international law, but it's done. Is that Fauci was responsible and played a role in sending over the line, the virus line, for research by the communist Chinese-owned and run laboratory in Wuhan, China, because the research couldn't be done in this country because it was illegal. So they farmed it out, like we farmed out torture during the Bush administration, W's administration, because it couldn't be done here. Congress outlawed it. They did the same thing here. And this was the root, this was the genesis of what the Chinese then manufactured and engineered into the COVID-19 coronavirus, destroying the United States, destroying Europe, destroying the world. Okay. And this is the problem here, is that someone like Dr. Mikovits, who reveals the truth, is shut down. Just last week, an interview was supposed to be aired on the Sinclair network. And I love the management of Sinclair. They're much more conservative than Fox News. But they had Eric Bolling, one of their hosts, who had been terminated by Fox News earlier for sending pics, allegedly, to female employees. He got scared. He wouldn't air this thing. He was two-faced. And in fact, what happened was CNN jumped on the bandwagon. They tried to destroy him. They tried to destroy Sinclair, unfortunately. The management does not deserve that treatment over there. And they got scared and they pulled Mikovits' interview, although it had been up on Sinclair's website for quite a while. The irony is the left actually, because of all this, it started with Media Matters, which is financed by George Soros, and then CNN jumped on the bandwagon. They actually made this a much bigger story. But the story is important. It needs to be heard. And to be able to get that story out, Dr. Mikovits and Kent Heckenlively, her partner, and I, the lawyer, appeared on Crowdsource the Truth this week for an hour-and-a-half interview. I want you to watch it. You can find it at freedomwatchusa.org, and also Crowdsource the Truth, which is owned and operated by Jason Goodman, my good friend, very talented person. And I want you to watch that. And I sent it to the president. I sent it through Don Jr. I sent it through Kellyanne Conway. I sent it through Stephen Miller in the White House. I want him to watch it because it at least needs to know that there's another side of the story here, that these vaccines, notwithstanding the fact of Fauci's complicity in sending the virus line over to China, but that these vaccines can be very, very dangerous, particularly for 25% of the American people who have impaired immunity systems. And that needs to be kept in mind. He needs to know that wearing of the masks is detrimental. Who would have kids wear a mask for 8 hours a day to breathe in carbon monoxide? Okay, that's dangerous. Even, adults, that's dangerous. And now Fauci wants us to wear helmets with visors. I mean, this is theater of the absurd. We're not space aliens here. We're human beings. And we need to act in a way that the economy is not destroyed and that our health is not harmed. So watch this video at freedomwatchusa.org. It's up on YouTube, Freedom Watch YouTube, and judge for yourself. And I want the president to see it too, because Fauci is the Brutus. Fauci is trying to stab the president in the back, and he's done a very good job of it. He's a leftist. There's no doubt about it. Most people in government are leftists. He's part of the deep state, and he should be fired. And the president needs to bring in someone like Dr. Mikovits and other people who actually don't have a horse to ride in this entire matter, because Fauci is believed is going to profit from these viruses. He owns patents, all kinds of other things. And now he thinks he's a celebrity, showing up with masks of the Washington Nationals, throwing out first pitches. It's gone to his head. He's become a monster. And that's just simply a reality. That's a reality of the way we are these days in this country. And I got to tell you something, CNN is going to get theirs. I have a complaint on my desk for the defamation. They not only defamed Dr. Mikovits, they defamed me. They said I have a history of pushing false information, and they're going to pay for that because they couldn't cite one instance. I told them to retract. I sent it to Jeff Zucker, the ultra-leftist CEO of CNN. I sent it to the reporter, Oliver Darcy. Darcy, in a very dishonest way, asked me for comments. He didn't even publish my comments. This is a vile, leftist, hateful news network. CNN, I call it the Communist News Network. That's what it should be called. Not even the Clinton News Network anymore. It's going far beyond that. And they're going to pay. So we got a lawsuit that'll be filed in the next few days. But I want you to also go to the internet and get it and purchase an advanced copy of my book, which is called It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. The thesis of that book is that the three branches of government had grown so corrupt over the years, particularly the judiciary, the federal judiciary, that we, the people, need to rise up, that we need to turn off Fox News if you're a conservative or a libertarian or someone of faith, or turn off MSNBC or CNN if you watch them and you're to the left. Rise up responsibly, follow our Constitution, and bring this country back to the vision of our founding fathers, because we're under attack now by the Communist News Network, who is supporting the communists and the socialists and the radicals, the radical blacks, the radicals of the Jewish left. And you know that I'm a Jewish Christian, so it's not anti-Semitic. And you know that also other groups are involved, radical Muslims, radical feminists, radical atheists, radical anarchists, and they're all trying to destroy this country. Their first target, of course, is President Trump. If they take him out and they get control, and it looks like that could happen right now, and you get Biden in, this brain-dead President Joe Biden, he won't last long in office. And what are you going to get? The vice president, who's going to be a radical socialist, if not communist, white-hating individual I'm a civil rights lawyer. I believe everybody deserves equal rights. And I have many friends, just like Alan, who, are African-American. They're more courageous than the white people. They're standing up for themselves, and they're standing up for their rights, and they're standing up for the entire country, whereas white people are running away. They're putting their heads in the sand. Look at these major corporations that have caved in, whether it's Disney, whether it's the NBA, or whether it's Major League Baseball or the NFL. They're just getting down on their knees and they're saying, don't hurt me, leave me alone, I'll do whatever you want. Well, the American people have to rise up. And that's what this book is about. And you can do it peacefully and legally, particularly with citizens' grand juries, to hold these criminals accountable. We have the right to do it on our own. So go to barnesandnoble.com, go to amazon.com, purchase an advanced copy and read it, because it's not like anything that you have read. I know I'm pushing this hard, but you see, it's no holds barred. It's not about Larry Klayman. I say in this book, honestly, I've barely scratched the surface over my 42-year career as a lawyer in fighting this evil federal government. And I've got to rise up now with you. And we've got to do it another way. I don't crow about documents that I get like Fitton does, okay, and go on Fox News. I'm telling you something. I didn't accomplish what I want to accomplish. And I want you now to join me to get the job done, because our country's not doing it. And listen to Alan Keyes, because President Trump needs to snap out of it too. He's not exercising his executive power. He's not using it properly. He's not being presidential right now. And Larry Klayman personally wants him to win. And I want to help him, but he's not helping himself. And you got to be honest right now, because he's sinking faster than a rock, particularly in the polls. He's got to take a new course. And the first thing he can do is to fire Fauci and get advisors in there who know what they're talking about. I'll be right back with Alan Keyes. Listen to him carefully. He's the brightest person to ever have run in modern history for the President of the United States. A brave, brave person. And God bless you. And God save America. I'll be right back.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with my very good friend, a great American thinker. I think he's at the level of our founding fathers. He should have been president of the United States. He would have been the smartest one in my lifetime. And he's former UN ambassador, ran against Barack Obama for the US Senate, and a presidential candidate on multiple occasions, as well as an author and someone who is able to analyze in the context of our Constitution, because he's a constitutional scholar, what's going on today. I introduce you to, again, my good friend and colleague, Alan Keyes. Alan, welcome to Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Oh, thank you, Larry. I appreciate being with you all the time.
Now, I want to talk first about things that we've talked about before, because we have conversations among ourselves that are not public. But several weeks ago, you called me and you asked me, you said, Larry, do you think the president's doing a good job with regard to asserting his authority over these rioters, these domestic terrorists that are tearing our cities apart, burning, looting, maiming, and killing? And my first reaction was basically, I don't know, okay? But you straightened me out. And what you basically pointed out was the president does have authority to, in fact, mobilize the police departments to take action and to get the job done, to put it simply. So I want to give you an opportunity right now up front to tell the public and our listeners and our fellow patriots what you told me.
Well, I think it's fairly simple, and I especially want to start by pointing out that the start of all this was supposedly focused on the George Floyd episode. It brought back Black Lives Matter into the picture, and they, along with Antifa, have then proceeded to produce these violent results. It's ironic, then, that the Constitution of the United States includes the provision in the 14th Amendment that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. It's in the 5th and 14th Amendments. In the 14th Amendment, it specifically applied to states, and it was passed with that provision because in the aftermath of the Civil War, they thought there might be southern governments, that got back under the control of people in the South. They might be tempted to sit back and let blacks be terrorized, right? Even though they were citizens and had all the rights of citizens. So they put in this provision to make sure it was clear that the states had the responsibility not to allow depredations to occur. Now, they termed it all persons because it's a right of all people who are in the United States to be respected in their what are basically their God-endowed rights. That's especially true of our citizens. And there you had the mayors and the governors in places like Minneapolis and Seattle, in particular, Portland now, and they're acting like they get to join in the insurrection. When in point of fact, when people start burning down other people's property, when they start destroying the stores of food that they need to feed their children, when they start tearing up the place and threatening them as they did in the Chaz with guns and so forth, it is the responsibility of the governor, the state, and local officials, because no state can allow that to happen according to our Constitution, right? And then under the U.S. Code, it says, Article 4 of the Constitution makes the national government the guarantor of the Republican form of government in the states, right? So if you have state governments that aren't respecting the rights that the Constitution requires, and those rights are essential to our form of government, our Republican form of government, they're denying those rights to the citizens, that makes it a national responsibility. And under the U.S. Code, who's the one who's supposed to make the judgment about whether he intervenes? Now, the governors and other officials can ask the president to come in, and he makes a judgment about that. But if he deems that they are derelict, he is not only told that he shall do as he sees necessary, using all the means in his possession, which include, by the way, the National Guard, which is the organized militia, and the not organized militia, all the able-bodied folks who might be able to help in any state or community in the country, which includes, of course, the sheriffs, includes the police forces, and it includes the citizens who are capable of bearing arms and have that ability. He doesn't only have the authority, he has the responsibility to put insurrection down.
Alan, we're going to be right back. We've got a little bit of time left in this segment, but that's the point. The president had the authority. He didn't even need to send the National Guard. He should have used that authority and not allow this thing to go on for weeks and weeks and weeks, which in effect is a revolution by the left against the rest of the country. We'll be right back with Alan Keyes.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with Alan Keyes. I want to talk about now how the president needs to also assert his presidency and be president. And last Thursday, he made a comment on Twitter, he keeps using Twitter, that we should delay the elections. Now, he may not have meant delay it past January 20th when you confirm a new president. Hopefully it'll be him, in my opinion. But people interpreted it to mean that we should just simply delay it and push it off past January 20th into the next year. Probably intends to try to say that because of coronavirus, we have a national emergency, we can put it off. But I think this is extremely dangerous. The president shot himself in the foot with this. He's given a lot of fodder to the left and the Democrats to attack him. And he's kind of validated what they've been saying about him, which is untrue, but they're saying that he acts like a dictator because that's what dictators do. Now, I want to get Alan's opinion because we talked about this for about an hour yesterday, and I agree with him. Let him lay it out. as he just did very succinctly with regard to why the president has to be presidential and take action and arrest all of these vigilantes, atheists, anarchists, and the rest in our streets that are destroying this nation. But Alan, you let it rip right now because I want your advice for our listeners.
I think it's a disease that a lot of our politicians now seem to suffer from, that they don't appear to start with the Constitution when they're thinking through what ought to be done, even though they swear the duty to uphold it. I always find that odd. But one of the things you have to remember is periodic elections were one of the key features in the Constitution. And they were there because the kings of England, for example, that the founders had, they could suspend the parliament, kick it out, send it home, and not reconvene it for 30 years. And they didn't want this to happen in the United States. So nobody has the power to simply postpone the periodic elections. And they did that quite purposefully with malice aforethought to make sure that the one occasion on which the body of the people, which is the temporal sovereign in the United States, the one who ultimately chooses the ministers, right, and authorizes those who make the laws, that sovereign is left out of the picture indefinitely. And so, no, you read the Constitution up, down, and sideways, you will not find any authorization for them to suspend the periodic elections. And then they make all the elections of the Senate, the president, all that depend on the periodic elections in the House, which is the body that's closest to the people. So it's clear they meant to make sure that the people at large would never be left out, never in a position where these tin pot dictators in South and Central America and other places can put their countries where they say, well, we're suspending the election, and then 25 years later they're still arguing over when they're going to have elections again. This can't happen in our country when we respect the Constitution. And the suggestion, I think, ought to rouse concern throughout all the people who understand that when they start even suggesting that, the self-government of the whole people is threatened, and we've just got to say, no, we can handle this problem throughout our history, even during the Civil War. They had situations where circumstances wouldn't allow the reports to come from different areas because they had been delayed in various ways, but there was no delay of the election.
Alan, it's obvious that the president is feeling vulnerable right now, and he thinks, and a lot of people think, that the use of mail-in ballots by a lot of the states is going to result in massive voter fraud and a fraudulent elected president. God forbid we have Joe Biden. Okay, I say that personally. God forbid, because what's going to happen, his vice president, he's not going to last long. I mean, he's on his last legs. And any vice president is going to be such a far-left candidate or then vice president that this country is going to be dismantled. Okay, and there's a good likelihood as well that the Republicans lose the Senate, so there'll be a complete takeover of the three parts of our government, the three branches. So I want to get your thoughts on how we can try to prevent this election fraud and what the president should be doing about it, not by postponing an election, but trying to implement with his administration and the so-called Republican Party, which is a bunch of establishment hacks by and large, what he can do to try to prevent a fraudulently elected president.
Well, I think one of the things that he can do, because after all, though people forget this, well, the periodic elections that involve the federal officials are ultimately under the ultimate control. The states have the first responsibility for putting the elections together. But the ultimate say, in every respect, but where the elections take place, right? You can't remove an election in one state, have it in another, for example, and so forth and so on. That's in the hands of the national government, the Congress specifically, and the president in general in terms of making sure the laws are enforced. And so when you're looking out for the integrity of the elections and the body politic, I think there is a natural power, an inherent power in the executive to make sure that elections are conducted according to law. He's the chief law enforcement official of the country. And he could certainly mobilize what was necessary to scrutinize that process, to make sure, to see how it's being handled specifically in terms of these mail-in ballots, and make sure that any fraud is detected before votes are cast.
Well, of course, the problem here is that there are a lot of states, California, for instance, you can vote 3 times in California. They'll send you the ballot by the mail. You can then go into the voting place. They'll give you another paper ballot. And then behind that, there are machines that you could vote. And they don't really check, particularly illegal immigrants who can simply show a driver's license, which they're allowed to get in California, New York, and some other states, and vote 3 times. And that's the problem here, is that how can one, and of course we may not have the answer now, it needs to be thought about, how can one, enforce one man, one vote and verify that who's voting is not an illegal alien or some other person, including dead people?
Well, though some people balked at it, this was a concern, wasn't it, when voting rights were being extended to black folks after the era of Jim Crow segregation and machinations to keep black folks from voting. And as I recall, it was allowed under the Voting Rights Act for the federal government to send people into a state to scrutinize the process, to look at all the materials, and to follow those materials and what they implied. And these days, computers would help greatly to make the comparisons that were necessary so that everything that you just described shouldn't be able to take place. But you'd have to start thinking that through and establishing the task force to get it done with various elements of the government that would have to be involved. You have to do it now. And I think that he ought to be tasking Attorney General Barr with this very job because it's not just his presidency that's at stake. I think it is the integrity of our citizenship to make sure that nobody is able to subvert and usurp the power that belongs to the body politic. Those votes must be scrupulously cast and scrupulously counted for our sake, not just for the sake of the individuals running for office.
Of course, we remember what happened in the year 2000. I actually played a role in that. At the time, I was at Judicial Watch, which I founded. I had filed public document requests in Florida over the hanging chads and the situation with the Bush-Gore battle that later occurred legally. And what we found was there was a lot of manipulation, not just with regard to voting machines, but with regard to paper ballots. Now, Florida, my home state, has tried to tighten that up a bit. Now you have to vote essentially with a paper ballot, and there is some supervision. I think it would be good for the rest of the states to follow it. But of course, you have a Republican governor in Florida. There's greater likelihood that the law will be carried out, not to the detriment to the president, at least. But in many of these states, you have these radical leftists. I mean, let's take Washington State and Oregon as just 2 examples, is that people in control of those states are flaming leftists, and they don't care about the law. They actually join in the rioters and things like that. So what can the president do in those states to basically neutralize the leftists that are in power?
Well, he can assert the responsibility of the federal government to supervise and oversee the integrity of the national electoral process. He can do that. And if in this situation, of course, with the kind of fifth column involvement that we're seeing, whether it's the media or some of these government officials throwing themselves on the side of Marxists and other folks who subscribe to an understanding of government diametrically opposed to our constitutional system. And I don't care what office they're occupying. If they swore the oath to support the Constitution and then they're acting in ways that contradict its basic requirements and premises, they have forsworn their oath. And so who is supposed to sit back and let them dismantle the integrity of the process that alone guarantees to our citizens that their participation in the sovereign decisions of the body politic is going to be protected? I think it falls in terms of the immediate attack against the body politic. That falls to the president. He's the guy who is the chief law enforcement officer. He also happens to be the commander-in-chief, the guy whose responsibility it is to defend the nation. And the Constitution and the integrity of that process, that's part of what we are as a nation.
And this is a proper use of executive power. You know, Alan, you were kind enough, and I was honored that you wrote the foreword to my new book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, which people can purchase advanced copies of on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble and all the booksellers. It's Post Hill Publications. But it's very important to remember that our courts, and that's the thesis of the book. I'd like to talk a little bit about that, is that Thomas Jefferson said that, and he refused to go along with this aspect of the Constitution, that is, the federal judiciary being unelected and allegedly appointed for life. Of course, we find out that that's not even in the Constitution. That has happened by practice. I mean, they only serve for good behavior. It doesn't say anything about life tenure. Right. But he said these judges will become despots and unelected dictators. And someday we're going to have to shed the blood of patriots yet again, because the country is going to become so unhinged and unglued as it is now. And my point is that the solution here is not in the judiciary. The judiciary is packed with leftists that don't respect the Constitution, with Republicans, lukewarm rhino Republicans who are afraid of their shadow. That's been my experience thus far with the Trump judges that have been appointed, with the exception of possibly one, and I'm waiting for a decision in Alabama with regard to Judge Roy Moore, him being defamed. That judge may have some guts, but I haven't seen any with who has been appointed by the president so far. So the point is that this is a proper use of executive power. Do you agree?
I do. I think that one of the things that we have lost sight of, the good behavior clause, by the way, doesn't preclude the possibility, for example, that the representatives of the people would, by law, establish it as precedent that every so many years, all of the justices of the Supreme Court would be reviewed to make sure that their behavior on the bench has been consistent with the Constitution's requirements, including respect for the provisions of the Constitution itself. And that way, when they had established phony a jurisprudence like the jurisprudence of abortion, they would be able to remove from the bench those people who didn't satisfy that requirement because they were making judgments obviously in contradiction with the Constitution's language.
You know how many judges we've impeached in 244 years, Alan? 8.
I don't.
Eight. That's one out of every 33 years. The House of Representatives has abdicated its responsibility, and that's why what we have, as Jefferson predicted, are despots on the bench. And that's my thesis in the book, is that we, the people, now need to rise up. We don't have a judiciary that will protect us, that will enforce the Constitution, much less the rule of law. And that leaves us exposed.
Well, but one of the problems with the Congress is that the politicians now don't see it as their responsibility to follow that, because in point of fact, as in, say, 2014, if you had had a properly dutiful Congress, they would have made the issue whether or not Barack Obama should be impeached. That's the way it's supposed to work. They're supposed to take it to the people, you know.
You're right, Alan, and we're out of time, but I'm going to bring you back. I mean, it's my honor to always have you. Thank you for everything you do. God bless you and stay safe as well, because you're a national treasure.
Bye-bye.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
The verdict is, it takes a revolution to forget the scandal industry. Get to work. Rise up like the colonialists did, like our founding fathers did, who took on a despot, a sovereign, who was running rampant over the rights of the colonialists, over the American people. We can do that. And in that book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, which you can pre-order on Amazon.com and on BarnesandNoble.com and a number of other booksellers right out there on the internet right now. I give concrete solutions on how we can do it, and most particularly the citizens' grand jury. Because as Justice Scalia wrote when he was alive, may his soul rest in peace, the grand jury does not belong to the three branches of government. It belongs to the American people. And we can indict, we can try, we can convict, we can sentence, and we can peacefully and legally undertake citizens' arrests, and we can hold our Constitution to the rule of law. Because right now, no one respects the Constitution. And that goes even for the Trump judges who were put in power by the president. He rubber stamped what Republican rhinos put in front of him, like the Federalist Society and Don McGahn, who was his White House counsel, that stabbed him in the back, and behind his back, the president's back, collaborated with Mueller. This is what we've got on the judiciary right now. There are a few good ones, but I would say about 99% don't have the courage, that is the ones that Trump appointed, to do what needs to be done, which is to enforce the rule of law in our Constitution. So what do we do then? We have to rise up ourselves. We have to rise up like our colonialists did, because King George III pushed on us, his laws, his edicts, his yes men on the bench in England, on the court of St. James, rubber stamped everything you wanted. And that's what we've got right now. A bunch of yes men on the bench who got there as a result of political campaign contributions and political patronage, who represent their own proper interests and the interests of the people who got them their jobs. And they don't even have lifetime tenure. They don't even have immunity that was created by the Supreme Court for themselves and the lower court judges. They think that they can do what they want. Well, you know what? They can't. And on top of that, as we discussed during the show with Alan Keyes, the president needs to exercise his executive authority. He cannot be afraid. President Ronald Reagan wouldn't have tolerated these domestic terrorists in the streets for one day. And the president has tolerated it now for several months. And it's not enough to say you sent agents. You had agents in these cities already, and all they're doing is barricading themselves in federal courthouses to make sure that it doesn't burn down. These agents need to be arresting and putting in prison where the sun don't shine these domestic terrorists. They need to be rounded up, arrested, tried, convicted, and put away in prison. And that's my message. It takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry. So buy the book. You can find it at Amazon.com, at BarnesandNoble.com. It's something different than you'll hear anyplace else, okay? You won't hear it from Kennedy's new book. I even forget the name of it, at this point. You won't hear it from any of the other books. You'll hear it from Larry Klayman, because with me, it's no holds barred. I tell you what I think, and I don't worry about the consequences to myself or how I'm perceived, and neither did our founding fathers. They risked their lives, they pledged their fortunes, and their sacred honor to found a new nation. They were not afraid, and you cannot be afraid. So I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. But until then, I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org. Sign up to see if you qualify for our class action in Dallas, Texas, against the communist Chinese for destroying our country to obtain damages. I want you to support our criminal complaint in The Hague against the Chinese leadership. They should be thrown in prison where they belong, along with these domestic terrorists in this country. I want you to support our cases against social media. We were the first, with Laura Loomer, to file an antitrust case. In fact, we're the only ones that have done it against the social media companies for the discrimination against conservatives, people of faith, and restraint of trade and attempt to monopolize. We are the ones that sued Antifa. That case is going forward. Even the Ninth Circuit allowed us to do that. This is what we do. We just don't get documents. We're trying to bring about justice because we're your Justice Department. You have no Justice Department in terms of the government. So God bless you. God bless your family. And God save America. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, share this radio show far and wide. We are the Paul Revere. We will prevail. We will take the country back and set it on the right course. God bless you, and thank you for listening to me.